Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Gochujang caramel cookies. That's right, these are my new favorite cookies, and they were invented by cookie genius and my good friend who I've never met, Eric Kim from the New York Times. And even though these cookies were brilliant and perfect, I decided to try to improve the technique nonetheless. But anyway, all will be revealed. And to get started, the first thing we'll do is put together our Gochujang caramel mixture, which is simply some brown sugar, to which we will add some soft butter, followed by the star of the show, Gochujang, also known as Korean chili paste. And what we'll do is take a spoon and mix this together until we form a paste. And by the way, if you're having trouble pronouncing Gochujang, just try saying Go Chef John, only a lot faster, and you will have it. But anyway, we'll mix that up and set it aside, at which point we'll move on to the actual cookie dough, which by the way is extremely simple and starts with a little touch of white sugar, to which we will add some salt, as well as some baking soda. No, not baking powder, baking soda. So make sure you got the right one. And then we'll do a little bit of cinnamon, followed by a little bit of vanilla extract, the pure and the real. We will also need 1 large egg, and if possible, that should be at room temp. And then we'll also toss in some nice soft room temperature butter, or at least that's what it's supposed to be. And as I grab a spatula and start smearing and mixing all this together, it will become very obvious that once again, I didn't take the butter out of the fridge early enough. And by the way, it's probably worth mentioning that Eric Kim actually uses a whisk for this step, which I agree is probably a better tool and faster to mix with. My problem is that I absolutely hate cleaning any kind of batter from the inside of a whisk. So I just like doing everything with a spatula. And if your butter is soft and your eggs at room temp, you'll be able to whip this into a light, fluffy mixture pretty quickly. And once my butter did soften a little bit, that happened for me. And once we do finally accomplish that, we will stop and add the last ingredient, which is some all-purpose flour. And we will take our spatula and we will very slowly and very carefully mix that in. And the reason we're going slow and carefully is not because there's any danger in overworking the flour. It's simply because we don't want the flour flying out of the bowl, which will 100% happen if you go too quickly at first. But once that starts to mix in, we can work a little quicker, and as soon as the sides of the bowl are clean and the last of that flour has disappeared, we will stop and clean off our spatula with a second slightly smaller spatula, or a finger, or a spoon. And then what I'm going to do at this point is kind of flatten out the surface a little bit. And then once I got everything fairly even, I sort of slightly roughened up the surface a little bit, since my next step here is to take our Go Chef John mixture and transfer small dollops of that over the top. All right, fairly evenly spaced, but also completely randomly spaced. And in the original recipe, what Eric does is refrigerates the dough first, and then he placed only like 4 large dollops on top, and then used a spoon to kind of roughly stir it and smear it in. But to me, that made the scooping a little more challenging, and I found the chili distribution not quite as uniform as I wanted, so I decided to try a slightly different approach. And after I finished applying that to the top, I took my spatula and proceeded to go around, folding the dough up over the dollops. But no matter what method you use, you don't want to overmix it at this point, since we really do want to see nicely defined streaks of the chili. Okay, if you mix it in too much, you're basically just going to get an orange cookie that's going to taste amazing. It is just not going to look quite as cool. So I thoughtfully folded that dough together, and once it looked like this, I decided to stop. And at this point, before we scoop, we're going to transfer that into the fridge for about 15 to 20 minutes, just so that dough firms up a little bit. And that's it. After a brief chilling, we can pull it out. And I'm going to grab this scoop, and I'm going to place 8 portions on a parchment lined sheet pan, using our famous 2-1-2-1-2 layout. And the whole idea here is that as we scoop, we are hopefully going to get nice random streaks of that Gochujang mixture, sort of marbled through that cookie dough. And of course, as you can see, some portions are going to have a little more than others. And once you finish, if you feel like fine-tuning and fussing around with these, adding and or deleting bits of dough here and there, go ahead. And by the way, I do encourage you to go watch how Eric Kim does his. And if you prefer his method for blending in the Gochujang mixture, you can go with that instead. I mean, you are, after all, the Eric Kim of whether to do it like me or him. But as long as your dough has some kind of random streaks of chili in it, you're going to be fine. And that's it once those are panned up. This is ready to transfer into the center of a 350-degree oven for about 13 to 15 minutes, or until they're lightly browned around the edges, and they look like this. Check it out. We got what I would call perfect splotching. And by the way, Eric did bigger portions, and I think only got like 9 cookies total. All right, at this size, you're going to get like 16 to 18. But anyway, what we'll do is let those cool on the pan for a few minutes until they firm up a bit, at which point we can transfer them onto a cooling rack. And yes, they do spread out quite a lot, so make sure you evenly space them. And if a couple happen to be touching and stick together, no big deal. Those are going to be very easy to separate. And if everything goes according to plan, the bottom should be beautifully golden brown as well. And I could not wait to eat one of these, but I'm not a warm cookie guy. So I arranged those back into a 2-1-2-1-2 layout, so I could take some contractually obligated pictures while they cooled. And eventually they did, at which point I grabbed one and broke it in half and went in for the official taste. And that, my friends, in both texture and taste, is an absolutely perfect cookie. Okay, there's definitely some heat from the chili paste, but whenever you pair hot pepper with something sweet, it sort of cancels it out. So I thought the spiciness level was perfect. Plus, gochujang has a lot more going on than just spice. Okay, it's quite savory and very subtly funky, and it works absolutely perfectly in what's basically a simple sugar cookie. And as far as the texture goes, we have something that's a little bit crispy around the edge, yet still chewy and flexible in the middle. So I finished that one and baked up the rest. And as you can see here stacked up, I got 18 total, minus the ones I already ate. Okay, so that was me following the original recipe with just a couple small tweaks. But then I decided to try another version, where instead of transferring dollops of our chili mixture into the dough, I actually pressed the dough into a rectangle on a piece of parchment, and then refrigerated it until it was firm. And then I spread the gochujang mixture over the top. And my idea was, if I could somehow roll this up, sort of creating a spiral of that chili in the cookie dough, maybe I could slice it across into portions, and instead of getting something splotchy, I'd be able to achieve a more uniform spiral that I thought maybe possibly would look better. And yes, this dough is sticky, and I should have probably chilled it again before I tried to roll, since as you can see, I'm involved in a little bit of a wrestling match. But it was fine. I eventually got it rolled up and pressed into a relatively uniform log, which I then refrigerated for about 20 minutes before pulling it out and unwrapping it. And then I cut that in half, and each half into 4 portions, which were pretty close to the amount that Eric scoops onto the pan in the original recipe. And once those were panned up, I baked them at the same temp, although these were bigger, and they ended up taking about 16 or 17 minutes, at which point they look like this. And I was really hoping to achieve more of a spiral, with the chili component not being quite as wide. But I got what I got, and it looked like it looked. So I let those cool and stacked them up, and went in for a taste. And even though we used exactly the same ingredients, this was a completely different eating experience. All right, here the parts with the chili are much more intense, and definitely spicier than the first version. But that's balanced by the fact that you're then biting into cookie that's just cookie. So I'm glad I tried it, since if we're not trying things, what are we doing? But I'm not going to say it's an actual improvement. Okay, my lovely and talented wife Michelle definitely liked this version better. She liked having bigger, more separate sections of the cookie and the chili component. She thought it was kind of fun biting around, choosing your own adventure. Whereas if I had to pick, I'd probably prefer the original version. But no matter how you decide to make these, like I said in the intro, these really are genius, and absolutely my new favorite cookie, which is why I really do hope you give these a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.